Everybody loves a good villain, someone who lives outside some norm or laws and puts our hero in a situation that causes growth or shows new sides of them. But what makes the character compelling? In this video, I'll attempt to go through the main bones of what comprises this broad archetype, so we will have a baseline to interrogate some deeper tropes in the future. The word villain originally came from the word villainous, in reference to the villa eventually becoming a village and its inhabitants. Morphing then into a term the aristocrats used to talk about the poorer folk that would inhabit the space, it got its association with the people of low manners, and when manners and morals became closer, a villain started to get its criminal overtones. But long before the language took place for this archetype, good and evil have been something that many could easily point to moments into a story. Your murdering, mustachio-twirling, damsel-distressing, burly man, or cauldron-stirring, broom-riding, children-cooking old crone have been characters you could point to as evil. Sure, some heroes have done despicable things, but in the end, they still saved the day from something worse coming. As a stock character, the villain became a boring and tired trope that storytellers wanted to innovate. We started to see the villain characters shift away from the obvious narrative hooks. Tropes like the twist villain and villain protagonist showing a true divorcing from the radio stories of Dudley Do-Right and Snidely Whiplash, where you could tune in at any time and have all the context necessary within seconds of listening. With this advancement of the character, it's more difficult to define the boundaries of this archetype. A savvy audience can't go by the Supreme Court ruling of "I'll know it when I see it" anymore and get by without surprises. This is because villainy is intrinsically tied to our systems of morals, and they've changed over the years. And this goes as far back as we've been able to tell stories. In ancient Greek stories, many of the villains and characters opposing the heroes were too full of pride or lust for power, and this went against the pro-democracy and serving the country mentality that was rampant. Villains in early American literature were the big businesses and misers that would stomp out all the small families trying to make their way, because those were the quintessential Americans doing battle against their everyday problems. Their villains were greedy, wealthy, and they were following the orders of the institution they were a part of, slave to the eternal dollar. Villainy as a trait is constantly evolving, but some traits inherent to the archetype have stood the test of time. Many villains are cunning, intelligent, cruel, convinced of their own moral purity, or at least of their goals and the means to get there, and have an ability to cross the law to accomplish their goals. A villain does not need all, or even any of these traits to be a good villain. Look at Gaston, the dope that rallies the town against the beast, with no plan or use of his brain, just saying that the beast is a threat to the town, and gets into a brawl with this magical guy. He does not act outside the law, is not cunning or intelligent, just a jealous man who wants to take a woman from the people she cares for. And this is just an example of a cookie-cutter Disney villain, something very within the mainstream and widely accepted versions of these characters. There are many types and styles of these characters in all walks of media. Yes, the shape of the villain is constantly changing, but there are still two factors at the heart of each of these characters. One of the main parts of what makes a villain is the what of what they're doing. This breaks into two categories for the story, direct and indirect, usually correlating to the scale of the villain themselves. Your high school bully usually doesn't incite and lead wars that takes the family away from your characters. This is an extremely broad category because a villain of a story can be very different in scope, ranging from the small-scale inconveniences to the mass genocide of a people. Often a villain will be shown as evil by the direct consequences of their actions. Maybe being rude or miserly has caused the boy of one of their employees to see an early grave, or seeing the people they've impoverished by the war they're waging, or the people they've wounded in service to their master. If the villain can change, seeing these effects of their actions may cause them to falter and do a heel turn, realizing that maybe the ends don't justify the means and only do when you can't see how the means are affecting the average person. This is typically when the villain has been influenced by another with worse motives. Maybe an apprentice has been pushed this way by a master, a parent passing down rule to their child and propagandizing them, or a spouse making the other carry out their heinous actions. But it doesn't have to be a person above them who has blinded them to their actions. Maybe a member of their government has been hiding the atrocities being committed under the guise of spreading peace and prosperity to the other lands. In any case, showing the villain their actions and consequences of them is a good test for the morals of the character. Whether or not the actions that they have taken were because of a misguided belief or because of a desire to do evil and accomplish their goals no matter the cost, when this is the case, they tend to be higher up on the villain ladder, both in terms of the organization structure, whether that be a cult, the government, or another group, and in terms of villainy. They set out on this path typically knowing what has to be done or coming to terms with what their actions will do to the world. Magneto knows that humanity must pay for their disregard for mutants and be taught to leave mutants alone for his private mutant utopia to work. Hordak Prime knows that people will die and submit to his rule for his accomplishments and rule of the universe to exist. And Tywin Lannister knows he's got to break a few cultural norms to bring an end to the war and put his family into places of power. All their actions have direct consequences on the heroes that involve losing people that they care about, but they aren't equivalent in terms of villainy. While how villainous the person is can be analyzed with numbers like total people affected and total deaths, there is something more that is considered by the audience: the motive. The most essential piece to a good villain, something the audience can rally behind, is a motive, the driving reason for their actions. Maybe it's a loved one being taken from them, an opportunity stripped unfairly. Maybe it comes from true hatred of a person or group, which usually spawns from something taken by this person or group. Or sometimes a family motive passed down like a blood feud. In the end, the motive boils down to one main point: wanting something you don't have and having the moral flexibility to start going down the path of getting it. A couple factors go into this and how it is received by the audience. Who are they doing their deeds for? Many get a pass for the actions they commit and acts of revenge or protection of family, or even if they want to lavish their partner in wealth. While he's not necessarily the biggest villain, John Wick gets all of his murdering excused because the people he's on his crusade against murdered his dog while living his peaceful life. Dracula is seen as much less harsh because he was running his crusade against the town that stood by and watched as the kind healer was burned alive for being a witch. He loses some of this when it's clear that he just wants the world to burn and wants to murder anyone in his way, including his son. A lot of leniency is given out for this because it is in its nature a selfless act of giving for your loved ones, post-mortem or otherwise. Often shown as loving or kind at the very least to their loved one, this will take place in flashbacks or visiting a gravesite to show their remembrances. Another that people look at is how many people are positively affected from their actions. Are the downtrodden give some sort of wealth or food? Are they a member of a group that is being abused or harmed? Typically, these characters are shown doing kindnesses unto the members of their group in an effort to characterize their villainy as necessary to help them to their other people. Maybe they are someone who's experienced something horrifyingly traumatic at the hands of another, and their acts of evil are trying to protect those who have been in similar situations or are ridding the world of those who would commit those acts. When characterized well, Red Hood tends to fall into this realm, someone who grew up in the thick of crime in Gotham and knows how hard it is for the kids. He wants to take those criminals out before they can corrupt or hurt others like he was when he was growing up or when he was Robin. Promising Young Woman shows an example of this as well, with Cassie terrifying and punishing men who try to take advantage of drunk girls after what happened to her friend. This will also lead to the characters being shown before and after these moments to show the audience the dramatic or less so changes to their character because of these events. These are some of the main factors of how a motive can be perceived by an audience: the who they are taking action for, the why they are taking action, and how their character interacts with those who are not diametrically opposed to their goals. The audience will forgive a lot of atrocity given the right reason, a type of "I wouldn't do it, but I can see why they did" mentality. Often the characters that they are raging against will be shown in their worst lights, and that makes it easier to sympathize with the villain. The people that they're acting against are shown to have villainous traits of their own. And even if it is done for selfish reasons, people still love characters like Loki, the Joker, Patrick Bateman, and say that these characters aren't that bad, and even have admirable qualities when their actions are shown directly as evil in the context of the story. This may be due to people having empathy for the issues that they have and going through issues they see depicted. We've all felt lonely and isolated before, so it can be cathartic to see them rage against their position in society. Taking action like shooting some drunk white-collar boys harassing women, or starting a revolution against the rich folk who ignore all the problems running rampant in the city. Even when this is one of the most despicable characters in comics, people still see him as literally me, forgiving all because hey, what he did wasn't that bad. So the motive isn't as important to a certain type of person when that character reflects what the audience sees in themselves. This doesn't mean the motive is not an essential part, just that the characters that the audience sees act as a mirror for some, and this will be easily excused and seen in a more favorable light. A good motive is still essential when crafting a character. These are the broad strokes that make a villain what a villain is, and that will change every year, and whether they are viewed as a villain will change person to person. But going forward, talking about some of the smaller tropes, like the chess master or the big bad wannabe, I will try to frame them within the context of the actions and the motives that make them villains. Villainy is a big subject after all, and someone needs to break these subjects down for the youth looking to get into it.